Hello and most welcome to 2014, our H series. We will today continue with Iain McGilchrist's The Matter with Things. But since I have some nice friends over today, I will do a little summary of the ideas of Iain McGilchrist to see if that could be an enticer to look further into his thinking. I should also mention that there is a whole series on YouTube, which chapter by chapter, together with another professor in physics, I think he was, goes through the whole book, and it's rather recently produced. I think the last one was maybe half a year ago. And they're easy in access. The books themselves, they can be quite challenging. As you see, it's a lot of descriptions, and there in the matter with things, there is loads of things in the marginals. So it is quite a handful. So I will take the background of Iain McGilchrist, which some of you are going to be familiar with, but I think it still could be rather interesting. As an introduction. So Iain McGilchrist started out as a literary vet. He wanted to learn more about literature, and he got a pull at the university when the professor wanted to sort of dissect poems, to cut them out into their smallest parts, fragment them. And he got so appalled, so he lost a little bit of his interests in reading at all. Later on, he decided on a career as a psychiatrist. And when he started his reading, he got a bit interested. But what happened during his educational process was the most interesting. Apparently, he had set a date to go to a tavern, and the girl, the other end of the date, she cancelled. And all of a sudden, poor Iain McGilchrist was out with any accompaniment. So he started figuring, what should I do instead? And he saw this poster somewhere in the university area. Professor John Cutting is going to have a lecture on the lateralization of the brain hemispheres. That is, what is the difference between the right and the left? And this is what sparked the interest. John Cutting had revived a dead scientific area, that is of the lateralization, or the sort of splitting of the brain into two working areas. By that time, it was quite a marginalized subject, and that was because Sir Sperry had taken it up among other people earlier on, already in the late 60s, the early 70s. And what usually happens when you create a new science from nothing, it will go the wrong way. kind of normal, I would say. It's not absolutely ununderstandable. And therefore, after a couple of years, it almost got banned because of its mistakes. The differences that the early model showed was way too crude and often wrong as well. So brain lateralization had become almost a forbidden area or a cul-de-sac to go in. Cul-de-sac. That's the right brain coming back. It brings in humor. Iain McGilchrist stride on this area. So let me try from a layman's perspective. Some of these things I cannot vouch for 100%, but I will speak about the physical differences as well as the mental or intellectual differences between the two brain hemispheres. The two parts of the human brain look very different. They are in a twist, so to speak. And this twist is something called chiral, a sort of spiral. And that means that it is very far from a walnut, where you have more or less two pretty neat twins of sides or mirror images. The human brain is very far from two mirror images. It is twisted. The bigger parts are contradictory to each other. And I think that could be the first surprise for many people, including myself. I thought they were actually like a walnut.
Mm. Det är ju så man beskrivs.
Exactly. And often, if you see depictions in anatomy books, they are not specific enough or do not have that 3D character that lets you see how different they really are. You cannot put them on top of each other to make up the same thing at all. Hardly at all. Coming into the intellectual differences, those differences are already in birds. That would include reptiles and even more primitive animals. So lateralization is not unique to humans. Not by a long shot. So what are the reasons for the differences? One could say one hemisphere is made for a general holistic understanding, taking in everything. At the same time, doing it at the same time, both temporal, so it takes in time what the left would call past and future at the same time. So it extends the now, going very far, and it extends space massively. It does not, handle contradictions the same way. Not at all. I'm mostly laughing because, like most people, I'm left hemisphere dominant. So it gives me a sense of laughter, which is very typical. But in the left hemisphere, there is either or. Something can be either true or false. It can be inside or outside. And think of the typically Greek distinction, which is so important between existence and non-existence. In the right hemisphere, no difference is made, which is oddly enough the same as in quantum mechanics. There is a quantum field rather than distinctions between what exists, matter, for instance, or the open space or the vacuous, non-existence. In quantum mechanics, it's just a quantum field, which does not particularly point out things that are material or fixed. This is one of the reasons for I think the name of the book, The Matter with Things. He sort of specializes in looking what are things really. They are not at all what we usually think of them. In quantum mechanics, things are closer to metaphors, poetic things, tropes.
Pancakes.
Yeah, yeah, why not? Yeah. Compare that to the left hemisphere. One example that is given by Iain McGilchrist to help sort of soothe the path into this understanding is a flying bird. High above, the flying bird has connection to everything around it. What's behind it, what's above it, what's beneath it. It includes hearing, tactile, inner senses, something called proprioception or kinesthesia, smell, all of it. Everything connected to the world and the inside. That's part of the right hemisphere. A totality, if you like, of,
totality!
of everything. Missing nothing. Let me give you an example. When the bird is flying, let's imagine it's a common thrust. It's flying around doing its thing like this. The right hemisphere will warn it against maybe a hawk flying about, or maybe a dog on the ground. So it can warn from all places and also know where it's flying in space. So it doesn't fly into a tree or a mountain. So it navigates the bird, it tells it where it is, both in time and space, and how to flap its wings because it knows its inner side. Inner side! inside and outside, both at the same time. How about the left hemisphere then? What's its purpose in a bird? Well, think about the same thrush. I make a lousy thrush. I'm a bit too fat. You can see me at one of those big birds, a duck or something. And Hans the duck is flying around. He wants something to eat. Now, it's a bit late in the afternoon. I don't know what ducks are eating. Let's imagine they eat worms. For its sight to discover a worm, it's impossible from maybe a distance of 40 meters. So it needs another system that can invent, so to speak, a worm. It cannot see the worm until it gets close enough. This is where the left hemisphere comes in, because it does an algorithm. Algorithms can help the bird localize something that is not really visible in any ordinary sense.
Det var worm. Yummy, yummy.
The laughter is here to bring in the right hemisphere.
So the duck sees the worm, yummy, yummy, thanks to the left.
The left hemisphere, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can compare that to the algorithms that are in modern AI cameras, the most advanced ones. So they can use an image, maybe it is completely black or almost black. An algorithm can actually see things there. There's nothing to be seen. But because of the calculations, which is so different from visual things, can actually detect maybe. I think detect it's a better word.
Mm.
And this is actually not part of the real world, but it can still help you to find the worm. So you need to leave the idea that the bird or other animals only sees. They do other left hemisphere things, which is a bit more harder to grasp, but that have to do with mathematics and a thing called complex algorithms, imaginary numbers and such things. So what does the bird do? Well, the duck, it flies to the worm and it finds it. And the right hemisphere, since it's dominant in most animals, will help the poor duck if there is some sort of other aviator about, maybe a hawk, falcon, eagle, or also the obstacles on the way down to the worm, tree, mountain, or so it does two, I would say, almost contradictory things at the same time. And if I understood it correctly, I have to say that it's a brasklapp, as we call it in Swedish. I won't go into what that is in English, but it's, how do you say in English? It does have a name in English. It means I'm not 100% sure. But one of the reasons why the lateralization takes place is that we need both these things. Finding the small worm or seed or whatever it can be to discern something that vision, no matter how sharp, cannot discern. And the general overall take of reality, the wholeness, the past and the future. I think the English word is waiver.
Caveat.
Huh? Caveat.
No, for brasklapp is caveat.
Yeah, caveat. I was thinking of waiver, but caveat is good as well. If which reminds me of when I was younger, I thought a waiver was something you wave with, so you can get through customs. It has nothing to do with that. So that's one idea. I think in the books there are several suggestions. It could be a whole complex, but one of the ideas that I understood and fell for was lateralization has to do with this. You need both the worm and to look out for vultures, predators, raptors, and what's happening on the floor, on the ground. Could be a dog that could attack, maybe. I don't know dogs' attacks. Dogs, I don't know. A bit worried here. How about your lovely Pythagoras? We didn't forget that one. No. Thank God for that.
She is.
She's safe.
She's safe.
Good to hear. Good to hear. You see, I was very much this is actually a good example. I was too much in the left hemisphere. So everything that's around and inside gets sort of narrowed down. So the left hemisphere don't know the inside as well. So your lovely dog would have been something of the inside of me, not something that can spot on the outside. And I now remember it, thanks to a bit of jokes from Kalle here. I go more into the right mood, and the inside came knocking on. Where is the little cute dog?
Still in the cafe.
Still, no, I was thinking for a while. It actually reminds me many years ago, I had this friend, we went to a Greek island, and he was actually my boss, was from that taught English, and he'd been drinking heavily during the day, and we went for a guided tour, just the two of us. And of course, as usual, he fell asleep, and he just sort of partly enjoyed the trip, and I told him, wake up. His name was Mick. Look there, you see that over there, have a look see. Yeah, oh, that's interesting, yeah. And he fell asleep. So he was probably in the left side of the brain. Alcohol actually puts us more there in that area. And then we came to our destination, and he came back to reality, the right hemisphere. But in the beginning, he just looked around and said, what is he looking for? And he said to me, where are the children? And I just looked at what? And he got angry. Where are the children? Oh no, we forgot the children. And I had to pull him through. There are no children on this trip at all. I think your children are safe back home. And then he came back. They were not on the trip at all. So then he came back and he understood it. And then he said something really weird. I think most people think I'm a really bad parent for forgetting my children. You never forgot them. You actually remembered them. A bit too much. But I think that also goes to show the difference between the right and the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is actually walking on nothing. It doesn't have its feet, so to speak, sorry for the bad metaphor, on the firm ground. What it does is, or what it do, is representations. In the book, it's often referred to representations. Symbols.
Okay, what do you mean? It's not empirical. It's just.
Yeah, it's instead of, like a token of. It computes, so to speak, signs for something. But the left doesn't really have any contact to anything real. Remember the little worm. To make the calculation, there is no input of a worm really, not in the ordinary sense, not in the visual sense. So it sort of does really abstract calculations on things that are abstract, not really from the beginning. So it could be that it doesn't have a contact to the inner, what you feel inside, or what you think, as I did in my case. I forgot about the dog for a second there, sorry about that. But it doesn't have any connection to the outside either. Look, I forgot my papers. That's the left hemisphere. Maybe I tried to explain something, maybe I made some calculation about time. I don't know, but that's the left hemisphere. The left is possessed by calculations, arithmetical, geometrical, mathematical. You could call them logical, propositional. It fragments everything. So if I want to understand you, for instance, if I'm extreme on the left, I would not see you as a whole person. I would see you as fingers, arms, legs, head, eyes. And this is one of the grand things. If you do have a stroke that makes you impaired in the right hemisphere, so that you become absolutely dominant in the left hemisphere, this is what these people, these patients, witness to. They stopped seeing themselves as whole. So they see that they are almost like, what do you call this, mannequin of some sort, moving about. Kalle found a very nice statue of Newton, which has bolts, and over here, and the jaw is mechanical. So they see them made of different, completely disjunct parts with no connection to each other. Yeah, there we have it. It's a lovely statue.
Utan att Blake by Warsaw College. It's in London.
Newton after Blake.
William Blake. William Blake despised Newton.
He did.
Yeah, he didn't like him at all. Because of these things. Wow. So what happened, according to Iain McGilchrist, the two halves of the brain, the two hemispheres, have been living in a nice symbiosis for all of humanity. And he mentions different periods like antiquity, the Renaissance, and how they match each other out, and there are specific, how can we say, helping tools to stop the power of the left hemisphere. A bit like we're doing here with laughter and humor, so don't get too lefty. But the last period, according to especially the first book, The Master and His Emissary, was the Renaissance. So after that, we sort of, most possibly thanks to René Descartes, Isaac Newton, or Sir Isaac Newton, and the Industrial Development, the Enlightenment, somehow the left hemisphere gained substantial foothold. It became absolutely dominant. And it lost its role as secondary servant. And it's very poetical in the first book. He made himself out to be the emperor when he's in reality is only the emissary, the sendebud.
Did you know that Descartes couldn't even see that an animal is an animal, that it feels things, that it's alive? For him, it was just machines.
Ah, wow.
Which guy?
Descartes.
Descartes, yeah,
So
yeah.
he's using only one hemisphere made him completely blind to reality.
Yeah.
It's shown in his research and life story, not being able to see reality, being so completely in that illusion that only one hemisphere can create. So his whole philosophy around animals is so flawed because of that.
Aha, how interesting.
He's a good example for you to use.
Thank you very much. And I can also think from my own perspective, I started out that way. I was very much into math, and then I got interested in logics. And I thought that somehow mechanically ruled the whole world. So I was oblivious to wholeness, to even to my whole body. I could study in positions that were so uncomfortable. People were almost like, how on earth can you sit like that?
He removed the skins of animals in experiments, and even though he heard them scream, and he saw them, and he was there with them and did it, he concluded they have no sensation, they don't feel anything. It's just machines. It's just their bodies producing these sounds. So it's nothing to take seriously.
Actually, you could expand that idea to even humans.
Yes,
Because
as they did. I mean, the categorizing of human. This person is not a human. He's an animal. So you can do this experiment for him. Yes, this person.
he moved, he was actually recognized by people. He moved in a really odd way. So the movement was not normal.
Descartes.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, unhealthy. He didn't, in the Renaissance, that period, the Renaissance Baroque people were really uplifted. They had like healthy postures, as long as they were well. He never had that. He looked infirm before he got infirm. And that actually progressed. There are many interesting details because what happened after Descartes, especially with Newton, because Newton really, not him himself, of course, only, but the movement that came with a complete new understanding of the world, because algorithms, they were almost like magic to people. All of a sudden, things that took centuries and skill and hands can be sort of calculated on a piece of paper. And they were correct. And the more correct they were, the more we left the real world and start believing in these things. There is an example there how there used to be, let's see, I can find the words in English. How? I'm looking for my muse here. I need to get into the right. Hard here and down in the bomb shelter. Let's see here. When you have a cart, like a wagon, there is a connecting thing that goes to the horse. I have no, it's made of wood. What it could be called in English, I don't know, but it was incredibly hard to know which dimensions it had to have to be stable and sturdy enough. With the equations of Newton, you could calculate that in 1 hour, and then you have the correct one. And people couldn't believe it in the beginning. It was almost like magic. But the more you did those things, the more success it had. Remember this, even the right hemisphere, I think, this is not from Iain McGilchrist, got convinced because seeing, feeling, sensing is believing. You could see the progress. You could do it. Very hard to beat that. No philosophy or ideology can beat that, although they can be quite strong. But it's unbeatable if you do it. It becomes incredibly convincing. You sort of become fixated in that mode because it was so successful. And this, can you imagine, this happens already in the 18th century, long before the real kickoff of the industrialization. I think that starts like late-ish 18th century, or maybe mid. Already started. And then it becomes stronger and stronger. So some more juicy detail to make the summary a bit funnier is that Iain McGilchrist is pointing to the schizophrenia first came during the 18th century. And that is
Alltså 18...
1700-talet. So that is a dominance of the left hemisphere. See everything abstractly, everything like not real, and even the vision or the way of looking at things becomes just a bit more fixated on things. Schizophrenic patients can describe themselves as made out of parts of wood or machine and move about in a way that could be perceived as different. Another interesting detail is boredom.
Yes.
Late 18th century was the first period in mankind where people started to get really bored.
How come?
The left hemisphere has no interesting new things to come with. It sort of regurgitate, idisslar, the intake from the right hemisphere. So it's a bit like this, oversimplified. Once more, caveat here, oversimplified. The right hemisphere takes everything in on the inside and gives a portion to it through something called the corpus callosum, the connective tissue between the two brain halves, and gives in a distorted form something to the left hemisphere. So the poor guy can only walk in the same path. It's the left hemisphere is not creative. Nothing new comes out. New for the left hemisphere is the accumulation of the old stuff. Maybe put in another order or rearranged. What does that sound like? It sounds like ChatGPT.
Or much research today.
Yeah, definitely. I think that you will be in complete agreement with Iain McGilchrist there and others. Me too. I do agree. The accumulation of reference material, piling it up more and more. Some of these paper I've been reading, references as big as the actual article. So you can actually ask, what did you come up with? What is your original idea? And people could even answer, I didn't have any.
No.
I don't like to be accused of that.
No.
That would be subjective. I just, like a good engineer, accumulated. So, how about the right hemisphere, the poor guy who gets sort of marginalized in this process? Well, that's also the seat of enjoyment, of newness, of beauty, aesthetics, creativity, almost all emotions, not all of them, but like joy, happiness, but also nostalgia, senses that could be a bit more gloomy.
What about terror?
I don't know what terror is actually. My caveat, I don't know. Maybe terror could be localized somewhere in between, because the left hemisphere, if a person has a stroke on the right hemisphere, that person usually becomes quite irritable, angry, mad.
What about anxiety?
Anxiety is kicked off by the left hemisphere, making wrong calculations. If you're not in the world, and I do that myself, especially when it's late at night, anxiety comes forth, making wrong calculations. For instance, what will happen tomorrow when I cross the street? Or did I do something bad during the day? This endless regurgitating is caused by the left hemisphere. It doesn't take anything in. Did I insult the person in the coffee shop now when I went back? That could be a thinking on the left hemisphere. Because it's not present, doesn't see the person. Maybe the person is actually being open to me and nice to me. That will be shut off. So we only make a calculation somewhere in this hemisphere. A fun fact, autism can also be caused by left hemisphere. That autistic people are usually more, not all, but usually more a bit like calculative, arithmetic, very good with skills that includes geometry, arithmetic, such things, sharp angles. I was a bit shocked to find out that my favorite philosopher, once upon a time, Derek Parfit, was an acute autistic. He was rather, oh yeah. Some things he never shaved, he ate the same food, he never took any pause for studying. So he was eating and studying or learning, and he was doing exercise on a bicycle, was inside, so he can study at the same time that he was doing exercise. It used to be my favorite. And can you imagine, he wrote about morality.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. The left hemisphere has no sense of morality. Not in the ordinary sense, anyway. I think for the left hemisphere, morality is only a set of rules, almost like laws, rules. Yeah, laws, rules.
It has no empathy.
No, it has no empathy, not even with itself.
Because one has to, or why is that?
Well, it doesn't have any connection to what's outside of it, like other people, seeing them as blessed with a soul. They are just, in the worst case scenario, if you have a stroke, they will become like machines. And I think it's rather pertinent because we live in a day and era there almost 100% of the population think that thinking is algorithmic or arithmetic or calculative.
And also the high prestige of math and so on.
Oh
in
yeah,
our society.
definitely. And of course also the high prestige of physics.
Yes.
But oddly enough, and this is actually something that Iain McGilchrist takes up, the new physics is
Not the same.
No,
Not the
not
same.
and not like that.
Not that.
The new physics is actually, despite what everyone thinks, I would say that's 100%. Despite what everyone thinks, the new physics is actually on the right hemisphere.
Okay.
It's the totality of everything. We had some Nobel Prize laureates, Anton Zeilinger, Clauser, Alan Aspect. They won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago in 2022, and they won it because they say reality is the totality of everything. So even the smallest little detail comes from the totality. Whereas in the classical worldview, everything is built of small details and go upwards. It's called bottom up. So from the bottom to the top. But we know reality is top to bottom. So even this piece of paper, even that little thing, it's coming from the totality of the universe. So things are not made by piling up other things like this, innehållsförteckning or something like that. You don't learn anything by cutting it up. For handen, for instance. Another interesting thing, I will soon go into the chapter here, is that contradictions is not allowed by the left hemisphere. It hates contradictions. It cannot handle them. So everything in the left hemisphere is either or. Everything that is opposed, it's something bad. It should not be there.
It's become almost a morality. It's bad.
It's bad, yeah. It doesn't exist. Everything that doesn't compute in the 0 and 1 fashion,
it's bad.
Bad. Is wrong. So you can see it's very computer-like. Computer. Everything is computable. And no wonder, as we live in the left hemisphere, we think those things. And this is why when you go and study something like literary criticism, you learn to cut up a poem or a text or take it out in its like constituent parts, making them as small as humanly possible, fragment them. So, and this is also the reason why we have so many subjects today. Go to the university, look at 500. Everything.
So smaller and smaller.
Smaller and
More
smaller.
categories.
Yeah. Everything is a totality. And from this sort of grand wholeness comes everything. Not from what is just in this room. The whole expanse. I think you can see the connection somewhat with the bird, takes in everything. So if I become, because seriousness is also connected to the left hemisphere. It's serious. This is the face of the left hemisphere. There's no humor. Everything is either or, coherent, consistent. Kurt Gödel, in the Paris conference of 1900, a fellow called Hilbert, he wanted to make all of mathematics coherent and consistent. And he said, can somebody do it? Here, is there somebody here? It was almost like that. Who will take the torch and do it? He will be my noble savior, the knight. And I think in that time, everybody thought we have to wait for the computers. Such a massive work. But there was this brilliant genius called Kurt Gödel. So he took the I think you say the gauntlet, and solved the problem in a horrible way. He showed it can never be proven. Mathematics can never be proven. And that, of course, was a devastation for Paul Hilbert and other people.
And everybody.
Everybody. Everybody. So it wasn't a happy day. There were two unhappy events in the 1920s for the left hemisphere. The first one being Kurt Gödel, and that mathematics cannot be proven within itself axiomatically. And the second was quantum mechanics. Einstein, who was more to the left side, hated quantum mechanics. This is one of the reasons for this famous dialogue between Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr, where Albert Einstein said, I despise quantum mechanics, I don't hate it. God does not play dice with reality. And then he said, you should not say what God can do. That was the supposed dialogue, which probably never happened, but it's very, very close to what they actually were thinking. And I'll continue on page 964. The three images in figure 47, previous page, are created by vortices in a water stream in the wake of a regular row or rake of rods of rectangular cross section. Cross section. Cross section. Figure 48 is a detail from this series. The next image shows vortices formed when a stream of air impinges on a regular cube. On a regular cube. And finally, figure 50 shows the turbulence created behind a stick partially immersed in water. In water, in water, water. This kind of pattern, also seen in the first photographs above, is known as Kármán vortex street.
What do you mean by vortex?
Vortex is, what is a vortex?
Virvel.
Virvel, yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci was fascinated all his life by water, its appearance and behavior.
Behavior.
Behavior! He closely observed, in particular, whirlpools, vortices, turbulence, and other complex flow phenomena.
Look, 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 look.
Look, 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 look. In fact, he observed precisely the flow of water round an old man's stick, partially immersed in a shallow stream. In a shallow stream. Is it this one?
No, it's plate. It's plate. It's different from the images. It's, no. I think somebody has perhaps booked it.
Yes.
We have to leave this.
Leonardo observed that water often behaved like hair, something that is apparent from his detailed drawings in plate 18.
Oh, plate 18.
So we need to go. We leave the summary for another day.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us, listening in.
Tack själv.
And thank you everyone for watching in and seeing in wherever you are. Have a beautiful morning, day, evening or afternoon, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.